My name is Laura. I'm 37, and for years my parents had one explanation for almost everything my younger brother did. He was only joking, he didn't mean it. People were too sensitive, and family should learn to forgive. The problem was that my younger sister was usually the person being humiliated. And by the time my parents finally understood what their excuses had cost us, she was standing at the edge of her wedding with no intention of letting any of them ruin one more important day. My brother Daniel is 35, and my sister Megan is 31. Daniel was not always the obvious favorite, at least not when we were very young. That changed when he became good at rugby. My dad loved the sport, and once coaches started saying Daniel had real potential, my parents began treating him as if our entire family had been handed a future star. He was talented, but he never developed the discipline to match it. The big sporting future never happened. The special treatment did. Daniel learned very quickly that consequences were for other people. If he acted badly at school, my parents believed the other children were exaggerating. If he was cruel at home, it became a joke. If Megan got upset, she was told not to be dramatic. The more they defended him, the more entitled he became. I tried to push back when I was still living at home, but the worst of it happened after I left for university. Daniel started turning what he called pranks into a regular way of embarrassing Megan. One of the moments that has stayed with me happened at a family wedding when she was 15. He pulled up her dress in front of relatives because he thought humiliating her would be funny. The rest of the family was horrified. My parents brushed it aside as ordinary sibling behavior. Megan never forgot it. Neither did I. By the time she was 18, she had been talking for years about attending a university much closer to home. Instead, she chose Imperial College London, hundreds of miles away from our family in Scotland. I remember asking why she had suddenly changed her dream. She told me that if she stayed closer, everyone would expect her to come home constantly. London gave her a reason to stay away. That was the moment I realized she was not choosing a university only for education. She was choosing distance as protection. After she moved, she rarely came home. Christmas, occasionally. My wedding, that was about it. My parents complained that she was abandoning the family, which always amazed me because they never seemed willing to ask what had made home so unpleasant that their own daughter wanted to be hundreds of miles away. After university, Megan stayed in southern England. Then, about 6 years ago, she met Ryan. From the first time she called me about him, I could hear how happy she was. He treated her with respect, he had a stable life, and most importantly, he did not treat Daniel's behavior as something Megan simply had to tolerate because they were related. The first Christmas Megan came home with Ryan after being away for a long stretch should have been peaceful. Instead, Daniel started trying to make himself the center of attention again. At one point, he prepared a large bowl of water and moved toward Megan as if he were going to dump it over her. Ryan stepped between them. My parents immediately tried to soften the situation. It was only a joke. Daniel was only messing around. Nobody needed to make a scene. Ryan disagreed. He made it very clear that Daniel was not going to humiliate Megan in front of him and then hide behind the word prank. Megan and Ryan left not long afterward. After that, Megan stopped coming home completely. And somehow, my parents blamed Ryan. Years of Daniel embarrassing, Megan had apparently not been enough to explain why she stayed away. In their minds, the problem was the man who finally told him to stop. Then Megan and Ryan got engaged. Their wedding invitations went out for an August ceremony. Daniel did not receive one. My parents were furious. They argued with Megan and told her that excluding her own brother was cruel. Eventually, they threatened that if Daniel could not attend, they might not attend either. Megan's response was essentially, "Fine." She said our grandfather could walk her down the aisle. When I heard that, something in me finally snapped. Not because Megan had done anything wrong, but because my parents still seemed convinced that threatening to withdraw their presence gave them power over her. They had not understood that she had spent years learning how to live without them. I went to see my parents, and my mother immediately started complaining about Megan's wedding. I listened for a while, and then I asked what exactly they thought would happen. They had protected Daniel for so long that he was now a grown man who struggled to keep jobs, expected other people to look after him, and still lived at home. Megan, meanwhile, had moved hundreds of miles away because she could not stand living around him. I told them that Daniel had bullied her for years and that their refusal to stop it had taught Megan one lesson very well. If she wanted peace, she had to create it herself. My mother went quiet. Later, my father called me furious. He said I had upset her and accused me of siding against the parents who had done so much for me. That turned into one of the biggest arguments I have ever had with him. I told him that whether he liked hearing it or not, they had failed Megan. I told him that a father who spent years protecting the person hurting his daughter should not be shocked when that daughter did not want him beside her on her wedding day. Afterward, I spoke with Megan. This time, she went further. She decided she did not want our parents at the wedding either. For years, they had treated Daniel's presence as more important than her comfort. Now, she was done negotiating. If you have ever watched a family protect the person causing the damage while demanding that everyone else keep the peace, tell me in the comments. At what point does forgiving someone stop being kindness and start becoming permission for them to keep doing the same thing? I went back to my parents and told them Megan wanted them to stay away from the wedding. They were angry, but they eventually said they would not go where they were not wanted. Then I told them I needed space too. The conversation moved beyond the wedding. I asked them what their actual long-term plan was for Daniel. Were they going to keep paying for him and taking care of him forever? What happened when they were elderly? What happened after they were gone? They stared at me. I told them clearly that I was not going to become responsible for him. I also knew they planned to leave most of what they had to Daniel. That was their choice. But I warned them that handing money to a man they had spent years teaching not to take responsibility would not magically make him responsible. For the first time, I saw real fear in my mother's face. I think until then she had assumed that somehow everything would work itself out. Maybe she believed I would eventually step in. Maybe she thought Megan would forgive everyone and come back. Maybe she had never allowed herself to imagine a future where both daughters simply said no. The wedding arrived in August. My parents stayed away. Daniel stayed away. Nobody stormed the venue. Nobody created a last-minute scene. Megan married Ryan peacefully, and our grandfather was there for her. For a family that had spent years insisting Megan was the problem, the most powerful thing about that day was how calm everything became once the people who created the chaos were not there. I stayed low contact with my parents and completely away from Daniel. Megan and I became much closer. Then, months later, something unexpected began to change. My mother reached out around my son's birthday. In the past, she and my father had pushed rugby on him because my dad seemed determined to recreate Daniel's old sporting dream through another boy in the family. My son hated it. This time, my mother actually paid attention to what he liked. She found Pokémon gifts, learned enough about his interests to choose things he genuinely wanted, and started making an effort with both of my children. When we eventually met for lunch, she admitted something I never expected to hear. She said I had been right about Daniel. She had stopped cooking for him. She stopped doing his washing. She told him he needed to get a job and keep it. My father continued defending him, and that created constant arguments between my parents. By Christmas, my mother was spending time away from my father and Daniel. She later wrote Megan a letter apologizing for what had happened over the years. Megan did not suddenly forgive everything, but she moved from no contact to limited contact with our mother. My father and Daniel remained cut off. Then in the spring, the situation finally broke apart. I was pregnant, and after fainting at work because of low blood pressure, I ended up in the hospital for 2 nights. My mother came immediately and helped my husband and children while I recovered. During that same period, Daniel said something awful about me and my unborn baby. My mother has never repeated the exact words, and I have not pushed her to. Whatever he said was enough. She confronted him. My father defended him again. This time, my mother did not back down. She packed her things and moved in with her sister. My father apparently believed she would calm down and return. She told me she had no intention of going back, and she wanted nothing to do with Daniel. The strangest part is that my father never even contacted me to ask whether I was okay after the hospital. That told me everything I still needed to know. For years, my parents believed protecting Daniel was keeping the family together. In reality, every excuse pushed Megan farther away, taught Daniel that he never had to change, damaged their relationship with me, and eventually helped split their own marriage apart. Megan's wedding did not destroy our family. It exposed what had already been broken. My sister finally had one important day where nobody was allowed to humiliate her, threaten her, or tell her to accept bad behavior for the sake of family. And once she proved she could say no, the rest of us started learning how to say it too.